Madam Secretary, what could you say to give Americans more confidence in the privacy issue of this?
Senator Pat Roberts is on the Finance Committee and questions Secretary Sebelius today. He joins us. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you, Greta. Good to be back.
Well, Secretary Sebelius saying that it's possible a navigator could be a felon. That question shouldn't be much of a surprise to her. I have a June 20th, 2013 letter from you, and it actually asks about a convicted felon, and you also wrote her in October of 2013.
We wrote her both times, and she has yet to respond. So I'm very glad that Senator Cornyn did ask the question. She did respond, and there is no federal requirement or backup with regards to any background checks. So it could be a convicted felon, and yes, then you have to wonder, would that convicted felon use that personal information? Doctor has to take an oath. They have to really protect, by that oath and by law, all of the patient's information. Apparently that's not true for the navigator.
Did Secretary Sebelius say anything to indicate her distress at this vulnerability, or that they were working on a solution or doing anything?
Well, that was the last question I think that Senator Cornyn did raise. I did not hear a particularly distressing response. It was a very matter-of-fact response that the federal government does not have that capability. Now, states do if they so choose, but you know the answer to that, or the organization could, where they signed a contract.
But
you know the
government's
answer to that.
The federal government's doing 36 of the states, so I imagine the states would have any interest in the federal government. We have Snowden as the example. It's like that he had a security check, which was most unimpressive.
That would be the case, yes.
That would be the case. You asked for her to resign.
Yes, ma'am.
Not just today. Maybe you've asked it before. You've said it before.
I think it was October 11. I became very concerned that the rollout was not going well. There had been a lot of evidence over quite a period of time that that was the case. In my statement, I went over each milestone where she was warned by virtually inside the department, outside the department, the GAO, the Inspector General. It's very similar to the question I asked to the CMS Administrator Tavender. It's supposed to be an end-to-end audit for privacy and security that's required by law, and it's supposed to be signed off on by the OMB. I mean, that's a matter of fact. You got to do that. And yet, Ms. Tavender said, yes, they could go ahead and do it on a temporary basis. That's wrong. The second thing is that I just concluded this wasn't going to work. I introduced legislation saying that if this wasn't up and ready by October 1, it ought to sunset.
Well, even if this is up and running by November 30th, which is the date, I mean, that they've worked out all the bugs in it by November 30th for access to the site, it still remains the questions of the navigators. That's independent of whether the website works.
That's correct.
We still have those security issues.
That's correct.
Which is, I mean, a problem.
That's a big problem.
A big problem, yes. I was putting it politely. What do we achieve if she resigns? What's achieved by that?
I think accountability. This is not personal on my part at all. This is a person who has said that, yes, I was responsible, hold me accountable. What does that mean?
What could she have done?
What does that mean in the federal government?
What could she have done about the navigators and the fact that they don't have these background checks and they can be found? What could she do?
If it were brought to her attention, which we brought it to her attention twice, once in June, once in October, didn't get any response. It's very typical, quite frankly, of letters that I have sent to the Secretary, despite a relationship that I thought was otherwise, and no response. And so as a result, we wrote the letters. We ought to have answers, and if it takes federal legislation to make sure that this is the case, I think it ought to be introduced and probably will be.
How about the president?
Well, I think there are two people involved here with regards to the bait and switch business. The bait was you can keep your plan if you like it. The switch was you can keep your plan if only I like it. And so the enabler here was Kathleen Sebelius, who wrote the regulation. But, you know, this is his legacy. It's got President Obama on it. It's called ObamaCare for a reason. And yet we have this situation where several years back he knew about it. Well, I say he knows about it. I don't know if he did or not. Well, if he didn't, that's a real problem. And if he did, it's a real problem.
Well, the problem is 2 days ago he said the same thing. So he knew by 2 days ago, which is a problem. Anyway, Senator, nice to see you, sir.
Thank you.